This man built a homemade rocket, just so he could launch himself into the sky and try to prove the Earth is flat. Mike's always been the type who loves to push the limits. Even back when he was just a teenager, he was already living life in the fast lane, racing motorcycles, chasing speed, and ignoring the risk. Eventually, he even made it as a pro motorcycle racer for a while. But for someone like Mike, that kind of rush was never going to be enough. He didn't just want to be fast or fearless. Mike wanted to be the daredevil, the guy who does the things no one else would ever dream of doing. But there was one big problem. At the time, he was just a regular guy with a job. No fame, no sponsors, no massive stunts. Just a working man. And not just any job, Mike drove limousines for a living in Las Vegas. So while he was dreaming of glory, he was out there picking up tourists. Then one day back in 2002, an idea hit him. Why not break a world record? Not just any record though. He figured, hey, I already have this big long limo. What if I used it for something insane? What if I drove it off a ramp and tried to jump it farther than anyone had ever jumped a limo before? And he actually did it. He organized the whole thing at a local speedway, set up the ramp, got his limo ready, and hit the gas. He launched the thing into the air and jumped it 103 feet, setting a brand new Guinness World Record. A year later, he tried to do it again, this time with a different limo and an even longer jump in mind. He aimed for 125 feet. But things didn't go so great. The limo didn't make the full jump and came crashing down early. Mike didn't walk away with another record that time. But he still held the original one, and for him, that was enough for a while. Because here's the thing about Mike, jumping limos was fun, sure. But it still didn't give him the kind of adrenaline he was after. If he really wanted to be remembered as the greatest daredevil who ever lived, he knew he had to dream way bigger. And that's when he got an idea that was totally over the top. He wanted to build his own rocket. A real one. And then he wanted to climb inside that rocket and launch himself high into the sky, higher than anyone had ever gone in a homemade craft. Now there are a lot of problems with that idea. The first being it's unbelievably dangerous. The second, Mike had no idea how to build a rocket. Also, he wasn't an engineer or a scientist. He didn't have the training. But that didn't stop him. He just figured, okay, then I'll find someone who does. Eventually, he connected with a guy named Waldo. Waldo built amateur rockets as a hobby. Not exactly NASA level, but better than Mike doing it alone. So they teamed up. They didn't have much money, so they decided to build their rocket as cheaply as possible. Instead of using expensive fuel, they went with steam. It's cheap, it works, and it was something they could make with stuff they had. So they got to work. They used scrap metal and other leftover parts and slowly put the rocket together. It took a while, but by 2014 they were done. They called it the X-2 Skylimbo. It was small, barely big enough for one person, but it looked legit. Then came the big moments. They took the rocket out to some land in Arizona, got everything set up, and Mike climbed in. And then launched. The rocket shot up into the sky and actually made it to about 1,370 feet. Not bad for two guys using scrap metal and water vapor. Once it hit that height, Mike pulled the parachute to slow the rocket down. But one of the parachutes didn't open like it was supposed to. The rocket came down hard. Mike hit the ground with a lot more force than planned and ended up hurt. For the next couple of weeks, he had to walk with a walker. But he recovered, and despite the injury, he was proud. He'd launched himself into the air in a homemade rocket. That alone put him in a league of his own. But of course, Mad Mike wasn't done. If anything, the success made him even more obsessed. Now he didn't just want to go back up, he wanted to go higher. He and Waldo started planning a new rocket. One that would go farther than the last. Problem was, they didn't have the money to build it. Even using scraps and steam, rockets aren't cheap. So Mike did what a lot of people do when they're trying to fund a dream. He started a fundraiser. He set a goal, $150,000, and said he wanted to reach 2,000 feet this time. But the donations didn't pour in. In fact, they barely trickled. He only raised $310. But Mike wasn't the kind of guy who gives up when things get tough. Instead, he came up with a new plan. One that was kind of genius, honestly. He started saying he believed the Earth was flat.
I believe the world is a different shape than what we were taught in those programming centers, which is called public school system.
He knew there was a whole group of people out there, flat earthers, who believed NASA was lying and the Earth wasn't a globe. So he leaned into that. He started making public statements about how he was going to fly into the sky and take pictures to prove the Earth was flat. The flat Earth community was into it. And more importantly, they helped fund him. Through GoFundMe, they raised about $8,500. It wasn't enough for a trip to space, but it was enough for another launch. So Mike and Waldo got to work building a new rocket. This one looked a little cleaner, and on the side in big letters it said Flat Earth. In 2018, they launched again. The rocket climbed higher than his last attempt, 1,875 feet. The parachutes worked this time, and he made it back down safely. And once again, Mike proved he wasn't just talking, he was really doing these things. He beat his old height by 500 feet, and that alone was a win. But to Mike, it wasn't enough. He still wanted more. After that last launch, he started getting more attention than ever. He was doing interviews. The Science Channel started filming a documentary series called Homemade Astronauts and made him one of the main subjects. Even Tosh Zero featured him, and the host pretty much called him out for pretending to believe the Earth was flat.
And I believe it is flat.
I believe you don't believe that, and you just want a free trip to space.
So he and Waldo built yet another rocket. This one was their best so far, looked sharp, had real sponsors, the whole thing felt more professional. And they planned what would be Mike's most ambitious launch yet. The Science Channel film crew came back to record it. Around 60 people showed up to watch in person. Mike suited up, climbed into the rocket, and got ready. The rocket blasted off, but right away something went wrong. If you watch the footage in slow motion, you can actually see what happened. As the rocket lifted off, it clipped the ladder that Mike had used to get in. That ladder caught one of the parachutes and ripped it off. With that parachute gone and the rocket veering off course, things got bad fast. We don't know exactly what happened inside the rocket, but the most likely explanation is that he may have lost consciousness during the flight. And if he was unconscious, he wouldn't have been able to release the backup chutes. The rocket didn't recover. It went up and then came back down fast. Mad Mike sadly lost his life in the crash.
64-year-old Mad Mike Hughes was known as a homemade astronaut on a self-financed mission to space. But as Mola Linghi reports, he died living out his dream.